And we are live. Welcome to the Coach Brew podcast. Got a very special guest for you today. I am joined by Steve Colfer, longtime friend and colleague. Steve is in his 98th season at the helm. This is his bio read, so I figured I'd just say it. 98th season at the helm of Cabrini University men's lacrosse program. Steve has quite the track record there. 19 consecutive conference titles, 18 straight appearances in the NCAA tournament. He's got a 284 and 72 career record, which is a 70.798 winning percentage. That is in the top 10 of not just Division III coaches, but all coaches in all divisions. 13-time Coach of the Year. I'm getting tired reading his resume. You still with me, Steve?
I am. Well, the first thing I would say is
as much as I can.
But based on your math, I'm going to say that my best attribute is I'm looking pretty good for being about 128 years old, based on my 98 years here and when I took the job and my age at that point. So I'm feeling pretty good right now.
And, this year wasn't a particularly stressful year for you, I'm sure. Nothing special happened other than taking the program on a magical run through the NCAA tournament and winning Cabrini University's first national championship in anything. Yep. And that was a 16-12 win over Amherst College in the Lincoln Financial Field, which is right down the road from Cabrini. It is, number one, great to have you on the podcast. And number two, great to be proven right after all this time. So for those who don't know, Steve and I have known each other forever. I've been saying for many years, it's not a question if they would win the national championship. It's a matter of when. I'm going to take full credit for this whole event, even though I didn't recruit a single kid, didn't attend a single practice, didn't coach anyone. I'm taking full credit for one reason.
Yeah.
And I want to remind you, because it does fit into everything we're going to talk about. You reached out to me after you read one of my articles that crossed your email and said, hey, love to get you down here to speak to the team. Here are a couple dates. I said, well, number one, those dates don't work for me. And number two, I already have you penciled in my calendar. And you're like, you do?
Yeah.
I'm going to come talk to your team the night before you win the national championship.
That is true.
What was your response?
I think I might have said, normally I would have said from your mouth to God's ears is something that I would say, I learned that from my mother, maybe. Not to go too religious right out of the gate here, but, obviously, I'm flattered, obviously, at that point, but not really thinking about it. At that point, I think it was sometime in January. I don't even know if the season had started.
Nope.
So I was probably more focused on designing the first practice and making sure we had enough balls and the practice pennies were ready to go and everything was loaded up and ready to go. As you know, as from your days in coaching and leadership, it's you have to climb the ladder, and if you skip steps along the way, it's a quick and easy fall to the bottom. That's how coaches approach each season. And 19, and I made this point kind of throughout our postseason run. We didn't do anything drastically different in our 19 season. We had incredible leadership. We had some trials and tribulations in terms of some injuries and some personalities that were removed because of injury and leaders, that weren't in our day-to-day on our practice field every day because of that. And other guys had to step up. But, you could pinpoint stories and situations like that throughout, a lot of the years of my career here and the teams that we've had. But something, along the way, and whether it was just things internally, externally, and making that bold prediction and then wanting to protect our friendship by not making a liar out of you. That's why I brought that team together and said, listen, fellas, we have to prove this man right, and let's go get it. And off we went from January on, and, it was a special, fun ride. And I used to sit in this office and say,
hashtag wise beyond my years.
That's true. Yes, I agree.
So, no, in all seriousness, I remembered very distinctly what you wrote back to me. You said, you're that confident, aren't you? And I said, I am. You damn well better be too. And you're like, okay, let's
Yep.
do this. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
freaking go.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. I came, talked to the team the night before the game. What I thought was most interesting, and I'd love to kind of jump into this right now with you, is what I thought was most interesting was the other team that was staying at the hotel with you was Merrimack College.
Yeah.
And they were in the conference room right next to us. And you could hear a pin drop in that room. They were, I don't know if anxious is the right word or what, but they're playing their national championship game, the D2 game, that next day as well. Mm-hmm. And your guys were loose as can be, really relaxed, joking around, having fun, not just with each other, but with you, with me. Like, they were really, really chill and laid back. And, you know, I think some people would point to, oh, it's kind of a home game for you. You know, you're right in Philly. Well, they still stayed in the same hotel that the other teams did. They didn't sleep in their own beds. They weren't at home. And it was a neutral site for everyone.
Yeah.
You know, what do you think attributed to them being just so loose and confident and really kind of poised and just enjoying the moment? And then we'll kind of work backwards.
Yeah. I mean, I think we had the right group of guys in the room. I think we had good leadership from within the team. I do think our coaching staff, as while we were dialed in and focused on the game plan, we didn't need to remind our guys that they were playing in a national championship. We didn't need to remind them that they were playing in Lincoln Financial Stadium. They're smart, intelligent, you know, young men who understood that. So, we didn't spend a week reminding them of them. We didn't spend them any time with building and hyping the game. That, you know, it is what it is. And I think so that kept us relaxed. I don't know. I had a deep sense of calm belief, kind of the unknown. And so all those things working together. I relied on a lot of people that have come before me, that had been here and had that experience. And I spent that Monday pretty much of championship week really reaching out to guys in my network and asking them for some professional but also personal advice. And the central theme that came back from Monday morning through basically Sunday afternoon, 45 minutes before face-off, was the team that stays relaxed, the team that can stay focused on the game but not overly focused, is the team that potentially puts itself in the best position to win mentally. And
at that point, so much of it's mental. At that point,
I mean, Amherst is really good, and so are we. And so it comes down to little things, and I think that our guys just did a wonderful job, and our seniors and our juniors and our leaders and our assistant coaches did such a wonderful job of keeping guys relaxed but focused. And understood the task at hand and didn't overhype it, and you don't know how you're going to handle that situation, because I've thought about being in a national championship game in an NFL stadium forever,
Sure.
and you're using that. And it's very cerebral when you actually get there, and you're actually doing it. And in hindsight, obviously I felt like the guys in our program and the people that, are part of this championship run, we handled it, as best we could. And I think that, as I get some distance from it and I'm able to reflect more and more, I'm hopefully someday I'm able to pass that information on to the next guy who I can benefit in that situation.
Let me ask you this, Steve, because I have people listening who are coaches. I have an overwhelming majority of people who tune into this who aren't coaches, who are thinking, oh, what does this have to do with me? And I think it has everything to do with you if you're listening to this and you're not a coach, because you got to, A, have the expectation you're going to win, B, put your people in a position to be successful, but also C, act like you've been there before, even though you haven't, or even if you haven't. You guys have come really close a bunch of years, but this is the first time you were really there. And it's not that common to win it your first time there, because everything is so new. It's uncharted waters. more often than not, it's a team that goes back and is a little more prepared and kind of prepared for that moment, and it's a little more familiar. What did you do just in terms of mindset with yourself, your staff, the team, to kind of act like you've been there before, so to speak, and not let the moment become too big and get away from them, but just kind of keep them real confident, like this ain't our first rodeo.
Again, like anything I do in life, if I don't know the answer, I go search the answer, right? I go find the answer. I try to, or I'm constant search of the answer. And I think that's what I did. And I going back to the people that had been there and done that before. I'm a big believer in finding successful people, and may not be able to completely replicate what they do, but you try to take elements of what they do and and to identify the characteristics that make them successful people, successful leaders, or have been creators of successful cultures. And I don't think that's industry specific. You know what I mean? And I think that crosses into corporate America and nonprofit and athletics and educational systems. It's that empowerment. It's that ability to seek others who share common goals and seek others that have had success or failure. And I didn't just call coaches and assistant coaches who have been on winning teams, because one of the things that I wanted to talk to teams, guys that had gotten there and hadn't won, is, as I'm sure over the years they've been reflective, if they could have changed this, if they could have done that, what would they have done? And I think in all industries, that's what hindsight is 20/20. And so I have no hindsight on a national championship week. I needed to gain that perspective from others. And that's the beauty of building relationships and positive relationships in any industry that you're in. That when you need something, those people are there for you. And now paying it forward, in the years going forward, if we're not fortunate enough for next year or the year after to be in that national championship game, and someone were to reach out to me, I would happily share the things that I felt worked for us. And that doesn't necessarily everything that I gathered that week we used, but I put it together and pulled away the things that I thought were most impactful for this group.
You're better off having more of it and not using all your ammo. Not having enough.
I tell our guys all the time, I'd rather be over prepared than under prepared. And in that over preparation, if we don't use some of it, that's okay. But under prepare, I feel like is a sin that we're not willing to commit here in our program and our culture.
Yeah. You had mentioned, not just talking to coaches who had won it and been there and won it, but coaches who didn't and what they would have done differently. And I think that's a really interesting point you bring up, because some of the most successful CEOs didn't just like all of a sudden catch lightning in a bottle and become really successful, at that location, first time around. Typically it's a leader who, was an absolute failure at their previous company. And figured out what they did wrong and made sure history didn't repeat itself.
And that's where you can't let ego get in the way, right? I mean, that's one of the key attributes of leadership, I believe, is being able to separate ego, all right, from the goal or the mission of the group, the organization, the team. And so, you go back a couple minutes in this podcast, you talked about what we do different. I couldn't let my ego get in the way, right? I've been using this analogy, and I don't know if I heard it or borrowing it or what, but I felt like that month of May, and maybe not even the first round game or whatever, we were on a ship, and I early on in our postseason run realized that I didn't need to steer. I kind of stood in the back and pointed. I thought, let's go that direction, and then let the players really steer the ship and let them stay engaged and let them kind of, and I just kind of kept saying, I think we should go this way, but I'm going to let you kind of guide the ship. And I think if you don't do that in any organization, they become passengers, and passengers become disengaged. Right. And then they wake up one day, or they wake up after and figure out, well, how do we get here? And what were the missteps that we took? And they're not aware. Only one person is aware, the guy who was steering, driving, navigating, doing all those things. And so one of the major takeaways is to, the trust and empowerment of the people that are working for you. Hire, coach, recruit, really smart, intelligent, engaged humans and let them do their job.
Yeah.
And if you do that, success, will find you. And don't let ego get in the way of that. And I don't know if it's taken me 23 years to figure that out. But maybe it has. And hopefully it's well serves
Yeah.
me the rest of my coaching career.
Let's talk about those 23 years a little bit, because I think there's every coach ideally gets a little smarter every year. You're not the same coach that you were your first year, your 10th year, your 20th year. Ideally, but there are some coaches who don't have 23 years of experience. They have 1 year of experience. They repeat 20, 23 times.
Yeah.
So how are you, besides letting the players have more ownership and your assistants take more of a leadership role and you taking that step back, how else are you a different leader than you were earlier in your career?
Well, remember, when I got hired as a head coach here, I was pretty young. And so, as a young head coach, I think the biggest thing is you want to be viewed as an authoritative figure, right? You want to have that line of demarcation between player and coach right away. And sometimes you probably overdo it, right? You overdo it. You're a hard, you yell more, you're more of a disciplinarian, you're tighter on the edges, and that doesn't mean we've lowered the discipline expectation here.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it just, you approach it differently. And I think life changes you, right? And for a young coach who's saying, well, I want to be successful now, I just can't add 20 years of life experience to me. I get that. But what you can do is take some traits of some older coaches or leaders in your industry and maybe incorporate it into who you are, your professional DNA, but make it part of your presentation, your authenticity, your genuineness. And so I think life changes you. I think you get married, you have children in my case, that changes your perspective.
I was just going to say that. I think coaches who have kids become much, not just very different after they have kids, they become much better coaches.
I agree in my personal experience, because I think I've always valued my players and loved my players, tremendously. But what you realize once you have your own child is your kids are going to be put in situations in their life where they're going to be mentored, disciplined, guided, educated, led by these others. And you would hope that what the lessons you're teaching in your program, your organization, are the same ones, if they're being done right, that your sons and daughters would have access to. And I think it does change you. I don't think it's a criteria, but I'm talking about my own personal growth and journey. It definitely has, and given me perspective, and it's funny, alums will come back, and they'll interact, they'll watch a practice or a game, and they'll say, man, I wish I play here now. I mean, man, we never get away with that when we were here.
Soft.
Our practices used to be 17 hours long, and then this, and we used to do, and some of it may be true, and obviously
some of it's revisionist history.
Of course,
right?
it is. But I think, and then there's also one of the things that we talk about in our program is new school and old school athletes.
Yep.
And that's a real thing, right? And you can't coach new school athletes with old school approaches, and old school doesn't necessarily identify with new. So you have to kind of figure out the temperature of the room with each group. And we talk about as a coaching staff and different approaches that we take with either individuals or our teams. And I think that that has also changed. And you have to change with the times, be nimble and be agile as a leader and as an organization, and respond to kind of the environment as best you can. That doesn't mean swap out culture. That doesn't mean swap out mission. That doesn't mean swap out, the non-negotiables. But, there are ways that you can continue to stay true to those things and do it in a way that is better suited for the current group in your room, or in your organization. And I believe that.
Yeah, I want to go back to that point you made. I think it's really important for anyone listening, be the kind of leader you would want your kids working for, playing for.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that'll change you in so many beneficial ways.
Yeah.
You've been there 23 years, 20 as a head coach. It's kind of a two-part question. Part one, how'd you know you're on the right track? And how'd you know that this was the right place to stay the course on that track? Is I think today more than ever, gone are the 5-year plans. It's more like a 5-minute plan.
Yeah.
Administrations, boards of directors, whether it's corporate or in athletics, patience is probably an all-time low. So how'd you know you're on the right track and that's where you wanted to continue to go down that path where you are as opposed to elsewhere? Because, you win 19 consecutive conference titles, have one of the top 10 winning percentages in all college lacrosse. Your phone rings, you get other offers, you get other opportunities. So how'd you know you're on the right path, and how'd you know this is where you wanted to do it?
I think a couple ways. I mean, it's the small victories along the way, right? Whether it be some professional goals or things that environmental changes within the institution. In our industry, lacrosse, you saw the expansion, the growth. You saw the area that we're in, Philadelphia, becoming more and more of a hotbed area, right? Our primary market that our university was recruiting in was becoming this, really hotbed of lacrosse activity. And you start to look at some of the research that's out there about trends in higher ed, about where college-bound students are headed in terms of distance from home, and how that became such a big factor. And I don't know.
It changed a lot after 9/11, right?
I say that all the time, and parents shake their heads. Yeah,
it went down to 90 minutes, right?
Yes, 90 miles, 90 minutes, right? Absolutely. So there's a lot of those factors, and I think some of that comes from, looking at, the environmental stuff, and then the culture that was being built here. And when I got here, and there was a successful athletic culture. Our men's and women's basketball programs at the time were very, very successful. Had a legendary head coach in our men's basketball side, actually the young guy who hired me as the young head coach, John Zeke. And again, lacrosse was still fledgling. It was just getting off the ground. It was still in the nest. But I was able to kind of just sit off the bow of the basketball programs and see what they were doing, how they were engaging alums, how they were recruiting, how they were interacting on campus with, the other power players, admissions, fundraising, faculty, and learn from that, and then celebrated the small wins. And that's something that people need to do.
Yeah.
Celebrate the small wins. And that may not have been winning more games. That could have been getting a recruit that we really thought was an A-level player, or got a kid out of an area that we had never gotten a young man from, or so forth, or didn't get them, but got into the final group of schools.
Yeah.
We celebrated those little things and reassured ourselves that we were on the right path. And I think a lot of times, back to your original point, is why we have such a penchant to change so quickly is because we've lost the ability to celebrate the small wins. Everyone wants big home runs, big out of the splash.
It's got to be sexy. Yep.
And if we don't celebrate the small things, then we get discouraged. And when we get discouraged, we look for another place to go and do what we want to do. And I think I said it in one of my, and I don't remember, it may have been after the national championship, about planting a flag and building around it, and I really believe that, and celebrate the small wins along the way. And it could be hiring an assistant coach that you think is going to be really effective. It could be getting a recruit to come in. It could be winning a couple more games. And it's that creating that positive, forward moving thinking that really, to me, I think kept us on the right track here.
Yeah.
And the community as a whole, Cabrini University's community, the people that I've worked for, and been around, that's what keeps me coming back. And so having an opportunity to grow this program as this university has grown, and have the ability to, be part of their first national championship in any sport, it's just very special, and, means a lot to me, but to all the Cabrini people that I've gotten to interact with over the years, and since the championship, it's been one of the best parts of the whole experience, to be honest with you.
So a couple interesting takeaways for everybody listening. I think the big thing, two big things, are timing and location in any environment, any work environment, in terms of having success, and sort of knowing where you are in the scheme of things. And the biggest takeaway I get from this, Steve, is I like to call it inexpensive experience. There's two ways to learn things. You can learn it the expensive way by making a lot of, going on your own and making a lot of expensive mistakes because you didn't seek out the counsel of others who have been there before, done that. And then there's inexpensive experience, and that's, paying attention to successful people and what they've done, how they've done it, asking questions, listening, and just kind of having your antenna up and your radar on for, why is someone having and enjoying the success they are. And that's absolutely what you did early on. There's a lot of inexpensive experience.
Yeah.
Who's doing what really well at a high level, and success leaves clues. And you're able to take those clues and kind of extrapolate them into your own program and just build around that, which is not real common.
Yeah, it's one of the advices I give young coaches, especially assistant coaches, and not even guys that have just worked for me, when they are looking to take the next step in their coaching careers. And they'll say, hey, I'm interviewing at this school or that school, and again, I think it's applicable across industries, is that I said, okay, and even if their men's lacrosse program isn't highly successful to this point, that's why they should be hiring you. That's what that's where you need that ego and that confidence. But what I also tell them is you need to do an environmental scan of their university, their college, their athletic program, and see where their success is. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in your niche, because that's why you're going there. But see that, and if you can somehow deduce that those things are there can be some duplicity there, and you can apply it to your program, then that's a good opportunity. If you search and search and search and really can't find it, that's a red flag to me. That's a cautionary experience, that no matter how much energy, how much desire and passion you bring, you may not be able to, overcome some of the things that are the barriers that are in your way, that pre-existed before you got there.
If it's an institution or any organization, if all you find surrounding it is mediocrity, that's a hard thing to overcome, because you're going to feel like you're pushing water uphill with a rake, no matter what you do.
It gets into the water. And it's hard to get out. It's really hard to get out with one person coming in and just having a different mindset. Yeah.
Now you talked about that environmental scan, and I think that's a great way to look at things. Just kind of like you're putting the institution under a machine, CAT scan, MRI, whatever you want to call it. What jumps out at you, and I think that's a takeaway everyone can do wherever they are, in whatever organization. As you listen to this. Steve, when you did your kind of environmental scan of your program this year, what jumped out at you as, this group is a little different?
Yeah. Well, this group is very special. They came in, they were very focused, even as freshmen. I remember a lot of their messages in the recruiting process was about, the desire to be great, and individually when we would sit and have that closing meeting with parents, and it wasn't just to be good, or very good, it was really to be great. And it was a common theme. And in isolation, you kind of have that conversation with the recruiting family. Now, as you look back at it, 4 or 5 years after their recruitment, I guess about 5 years now, if they were, as we were recruiting them as juniors and seniors in high school, a lot of them shared those same characteristics. And so, and that has influenced the other young men that we've recruited behind them. And so, you go back a year when we lost in the Sweet 16 to Wesleyan, who went on and won the national championship. There was obviously a strong respect for Wesleyan's program, their coaches, their players, and then ultimately a sense of we were happy for Wesleyan that they won, because
you played them closer than anybody. You played them closer than anyone.
Yeah, it was a close game, and John, John Rowell, who's their head coach and a longtime head coach, and I talked after the game, and we talked subsequently throughout the tournament a little bit. He was, extremely complimentary and really, awaken to the Cabrini Lacrosse, and what the players we had and the style that we play and the aggressive, physical, tough kids that we had. And so all of that kind of lended itself to 19. So when you go back and you say, yeah, most guys get to a national championship and lose, have to lose a championship to win a championship. You'll hear that in sports a lot. I almost feel like the Wesleyan game was our national championship last year. That's how our players felt. And one of the examples of that is because actually when Wesleyan was playing Salisbury in the 18 national championship, a bunch of our guys were watching it at home individually, but on a group chat, and I was keyed into it with the rising seniors, maybe even the rising juniors and seniors at that point. And they started talking about the game and that game and what it meant to them. I just felt there was just that moment. That's May 18, where we're now done. We're on our summer break for 7, 8, 10 days, whatever it may be at that point. There was a forward thinking. There was a burning desire to get back, get working, and get after it. That game, I think, even though it wasn't a national championship, to the leaders and the guys that ultimately were the catalyst of this year's team, it was.
That's what I was getting at, Steve, because your leadership team did something a little different back in the fall on their own without you, with the rest of the team. And I'd love for you to share that with everybody, because I think there's just a ton that people can learn from that.
So our leaders took it upon themselves to engage all the seniors. They took all the seniors away. And where we're located, we're in a Philadelphia suburb, and the Jersey beaches and shore, depending on where you're headed, an hour and a half to 2 hours. And, and obviously most people go there to vacation, relax, and have a good time. And these guys came back to school, and we were probably in classes a week or two. And fall ball was about a week away from starting. And the weekend, I think, before, a couple of seniors got together and secured a house over in the Jersey Shore and took, I think 12 of our seniors over there. And they did a whole weekend of leadership activities and engagement and made takeaways and came back and debriefed. And really, it was, in their words, powerful. It was emotional. It was raw. It was real.
Yeah.
It was, in any locker room, I want obviously us to be, friends to all, and have a common bond. But as you know, John, and any team, anyone that's ever been on a team, there's groups in you're just going to be closer to some personality types, and that doesn't make it, and so that's obviously our seniors too, and they came back just really as a tight-knit group. And I think one of the things were that they came up with the agenda. They were part of the design, the implementation, and the takeaway, and they felt very empowered by that. Yeah. And I sat down and took what they brought back and took some of their suggestions, and the experience was wonderful. The takeaways were great. But again, that puts us on, letting them. I wasn't threatened by them having this experience. I didn't feel like there was a coup d'etat, that was happening. They weren't. It was just about a group of young men that showed that they wanted to be engaged at a different level.
And they wanted to own it. It was all about ownership.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what everyone would be hoping for.
Yeah.
There are people listening who wish they had that kind of dynamic going on in their organization right now. And I think the lesson is it doesn't all have to emanate from the person at the top.
No.
It can. And that's like when I talk to coaches, like if the message is constantly coming from you,
mm-hmm.
if it's the right message, it's a good message, you'll have a good team. You're not going to have a great team. You'll have a good team. You'll be tired. Your assistants will be tired. You'll have gray hair. You'll be exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually your players will get sick of hearing the same thing from you. But when they hear it from each other and they own that message, and it's the same, it's a uniform message, there's continuity, that's when you'll have a great team. When they're coaching each other, it doesn't all have to come from you. You'll have a great team. And that's what they tapped into this year, your team.
Yeah.
They owned it. It was your message, but they owned it, and you let them own it. And that's the toughest thing for a leader to do, is to let go. Can you talk about just how, because it's not easy for anyone to let go as a leader, but what made you comfortable kind of stepping back, as you said, on the ship and just suggesting rather than commanding?
I don't know if it was one thing, you know. I felt I don't know. I mean, I just, it was just, you could just see the way that they were carrying themselves every day. You know, I mean, again, you go back and in our first game, we lose a 2-time All-American. In our third game, we use a 2-time All-American. You know, then we lose another guy. Then we lose another guy. You know, I mean, it was just, but they never came to work the next day heads down, disengaged, depressed. Like, how are we going to do this? And as they were going through those challenges of February, March, and even into April, I think the way they carried themselves instilled a confidence in me, going back to your point, that I didn't need to come to practice every day and instill a confidence in them. And so I think by them doing their jobs, doing it well and handling it the right way, and guys stepping up in the moment. You know, as coaches, we always talk next guy up, next man up. And sometimes your third string guy is your third string guy for a reason, right? Yeah. You know what I mean? He's just not as good as the first two guys in front of him. But you have to compensate in other ways. And so that third string guy may have to play more, but you're going to have to even out, you know, in other ways. And I think we did a really good job of doing that. And I think as I saw them doing it, not just on the game field, but in their practice habits and the way they were just interacting and carrying themselves within our building here, it instilled a confidence in me that allowed me to kind of release more responsibilities to them. And they did a wonderful job with it. And it will affect me forever going forward. Right. With the way, you know, I manage and guide and lead teams. I think every personality group will be different, right? Because of the makeup of the room and the chemistry. You have to read the room a little bit, but you can't go through something like that. You can't have the outcome that we had and not have some really strong takeaways that guide and lend itself to future situations. So, you know, there's not one thing. It was just the way they showed up and did their job that instilled a confidence in me. That I'm
going to go ahead and push back. I'm going to go ahead and push back on that because I think you answered your question in the first sentence. Yeah. And to me, there really is one thing, and it's you said you'd go out to practice and you would notice every day. Mm-hmm. And you just kind of notice how they're carrying themselves, what they were saying to each other, how they were interacting. I think that's the one thing for anybody, and that's where there's such a disconnect with leadership today is you're not out there every day on the front lines noticing. Mm-hmm. Not you, the general you. Most leaders don't have their finger on the pulse of their team. You had your finger on the pulse of the team. You knew you could take a step back, loosen the reins, let the message come from them because you saw it in their behavior, their language, how they interacted, their work ethic, how much they owned, how much responsibility they wanted every day. So I think that, you know, it's a huge takeaway for people is you've got to have your finger on the pulse of your team. Yeah. And in our industry, I go in season no less than 24 hours than being able to be in there with them doing it. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so if I'm a CEO and our sales are down, I can't go on every sales call the next 24 hours with my sales force that's spread out across the country or the globe. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm only probably able to meet with my executive team, who's then able to meet with their team and on down. So the beauty of what we get to do is we're with almost our entire organization no less than 24 hours apart from something that either was wildly successful the day before or tragically not successful and then we needed to correct and fix and go. So, but I do think to your point, it is, you know, is that interaction is so key, right? And leading from the ground sometimes is really important. And being accountable and being there and learning from subordinates is so important. You know, learning does not just come from the front of the classroom. It has to come from both sides. And I've always said that to every recruit. Now, I can't ask you to be a better student, a better player, a better person if I'm not willing to do the same thing as your head coach, that I'm not willing to seek out to be a better
coach, a better administrator, a better person throughout your journey. And I really try to stress that point in our recruiting messages. And maybe it's similar, maybe it's unique, I don't know, but I just don't feel like learning is top down. It's an exchange, and I learn as much from this team as any team that I've ever had.
Yeah. And I think you don't just have a unique relationship with your team or your finger on the pulse of your team. You have a unique relationship with your contemporaries, with your coaching peers, and you keep your finger on the pulse of what other people are doing. And part of that, walking the walk with your team and you becoming a better version of yourself every year is not just celebrating the small wins, as you talked about, within your team, within your program, on your campus, but celebrating other people's small and not so small wins. Sure. And this is something that I was just so struck by, Steve. I told you this, when we talked before we got on the air, but I've known you 23 years, and I feel like I saw a very different side of you. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a really fascinating way. I saw a very different side of you this year, not because you won a national championship, but because the things you've been doing silently, subtly, quietly behind the scenes every single year finally actually went public and came to the light. And what I'm referring to is these notes that you would send your coaching peers who had success and made it to the biggest stage for the first time, being the national championship game. So that's what I wanted to jump into next, because that also is pretty uncommon. We tend to, as coaches, and I think all leaders to a certain extent are guilty of this. The coaching profession is probably a little to the extreme with it, but we tend to hold our cards pretty close to the vest. We tend to think that, we treat our information like we have the launch codes to nuclear weapons. We don't share exactly what we're doing. You go to a coaching clinic and coaches will throw some plays up on the, the PowerPoint or the video screen, but it isn't necessarily exactly what they do. Yeah. That stuff's kept secret. That's Colonel Sanders' secret recipe that doesn't get leaked to the public. You're pretty transparent, and you walk your talk. You share willingly and openly. And if you could just share with everyone listening, a little bit about the history of these notes that you would send.
I think it's karma, right? You create karma, and so, but more importantly, it's hope, right? Because when programs would break through or cross through, and going back to a couple of your questions a while ago, like what knew you were on the right path, what kept you there at Cabrini, why continue to grind and build? Because when I would see others who I thought were on similar paths or had taken similar routes, and they had crossed through and got to the pinnacle, I was happy, excited for them. And selfishly, it renewed hope in me that we were on the right path, because, there is self-doubt, there is questioning that needs to go on. And there is, some hard discussions that you have with your athletic director, you're the people in charge of any university about, are we doing the right thing? Do we have enough resources? Are we staffed out the right way? Are we financed the right way? And so forth. But when I would see these programs at any level, Division I, II, and III level, break through, selfishly, it gave me hope that we were on the right path. And one of the, I think one of the great kickbacks to that, or was when we actually won in the Final Four, and now we're going to play the national championship game. I'll talk. Steve Kudelka, the head coach down at Lynchburg, who had made it to the national championship in 2015, sent me an email probably bright and early Monday morning, one of the first ones I had received. But it was basically my email to him in 15 that he had kept, forwarded back to me with his own little note on top of it, which I thought was awesome, because, most people delete emails very quickly. They like to keep their inbox clean and, and get rid of stuff. And that feels like they're managing, their email inflow and outflow properly. He kept it, and that's now 4 years ago. And sent that email back to me with his own note, referencing this email and how much it meant to him. And then, you know, and then I obviously talked to him throughout the week. And he was one of my sounding boards.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Again, I think the sport that we're in, the industry that we're in, so many people have given me so much. I've learned from so many others. They have opened up their programs and their doors and their ideas. For me to take a time to send a text, a phone call, or an email to a coach, something I didn't know at all. I had no professional relationship with. And some respond, most responded, not all, you know, but that's not why I sent it, right? I was
as much for you as you sent as much for you as you did for them.
Yeah, and maybe, you know, it makes me more selfish than anything. I think, but I think it gave me hope, and to me, doing anything without the ingredient of hope involved is obviously very depressing. And I was genuinely happy for those guys because I felt like they were doing it the right way. They've been on the same path that I'm on, and I just need to continue the journey. And that belief and that confidence, and ultimately, you know, this season, you know, I think proved a lot of that. I think in hindsight now, right? But
yeah, you had mentioned karma, and I think it's important that you know, there's an element of karma in everything we do. But you know, these letters and cards and notes, emails to coaches who, you know, kind of made it to the biggest stage for the first time and gave you hope. What that reveals is an abundance mentality, not a scarcity mindset. And so often in so many industries, you know, the mindset is scarcity. And if someone else, it's a zero-sum game, someone else wins, it means you lose, and you should be happy for someone else's success. When it's, you know, quite the contrary. You know, one of the few other industries I see people celebrating each other's wins and victories is the music industry, where artists genuinely root for each other. When, you know, one of them, you know, gets a gold or platinum album, you know, everyone celebrates it, even though it meant someone else didn't get it. You know, when someone releases a new album, you know, their peers, their quote, I use air quotes, competitors, will, you know, tweet out or post or comment or you know, put a message on Facebook to go buy their quote competition's album. You know, it's mutual respect. And I think that's unique to some industries. The craft beer industry is also another one of those where they genuinely root for each other. But most industries, it's you know, sense of competition, meaning there's an enemy, an opponent. When in reality, if you look at the Greek origin, it's either Greek or Latin. I always forget. But the origin of the word competition means to compete with, to strive with. Not against, but with. And I think that everyone listening would be very well served to send out a note, shoot an email or a text to your quote, air quotes, competition. Celebrating their success, congratulating them, because you need that element of hope if you haven't been there yet. Yourself. Keyword being yet.
And it needs to come from a genuine place, right? And comes from a genuine place, and not just checking a box of the things that I need to do. And you know, I mean, I think that, you know, again, celebrating others is okay, you know, and it doesn't mean, you know, because again, what we do in our industry, we get to hit the reset button, you know, every year. And so every team, after the moment since we've won the championship back in May, every team is now looking forward to the 2020 season, you know, and we need to do the same thing. We don't get to replay the 2019 season again. We have to move forward with the 2020 season and try to duplicate our success and so forth. And every other coach and program in our industry is saying, no, now we want to create our own path and have that success and learn from. And so, you know, I don't know if I thought that deeply about it. I think the one thing that drove me to do it was, especially when I could, is that hope that that karma, that opportunity, that experience could find our program if we kept just plugging away and doing the right things. And I think, again, that those elements transcend my industry and what I do and our sport and my position. And I think, to your point, to the people out there. I think that's those good things, those seeds come back in so many positive ways that you sow.
Yeah. And just keep in mind that it's not a question of if, it's a matter of when for you. And because it hasn't happened doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It just hasn't happened yet.
Right.
One other thing I found really interesting, Steve, was in your post-game. It was actually after your post-game press conference.
Yeah.
They have like that cooling off period. I think they give the teams 20 minutes, and then you go to the dais or the podium or whatever, and you get peppered with questions behind a microphone. You pulled, I don't want to talk about that because everybody does that, but here's what everybody doesn't do, folks. Everybody doesn't pull a couple key reporters aside and A, thank them, but B, also make a comment to them about the future. You pulled a few reporters aside, thanked them, and then commented to them about something, I'll let you share. But again, we talk about abundance mindset. It's very revealing. So if you could just share what was said afterwards, you don't have to say who exactly you said it to. Just the fact that you wanted to seek them out and have this conversation.
Yeah, so I mean, you leave that post-game press conference under the bowels of the NFL stadium. You're working your way back to the locker room, and you're going through a big hallway, and there's a lot of people there and milling about. But I saw some of the guys that cover our sport regionally, nationally, and I made it a point to just touch base with them and thank them for telling our story before we were a story, and just finding little elements of our program and our story, years ago. And I didn't forget that because it's all part of who we are now. And we were probably maybe not in the position we were in 19 without that kind of publicity exposure or just the human interest element that they promoted. So you have to be a little bit of a self-promoter, right? But at the same time, when people are able to help you out and benefit you in that way, by thanking them. And what I said to them was go find the next Cabrini, go find the next Steve Colfer and do the same thing. Because it's very powerful, and the things that you've done for us have been very powerful in that. And I wanted to thank them for that, and encourage them to continue to do that. And they're good at their jobs, and they're growing our game and growing our sport. But I just at that moment it was the right thing, and I didn't forget that. Every little bit helps. All those little things add up to one big thing. And I wanted to make sure that some of the guys, and I was just really fortunate. Timing is everything in life. I saw a lot of those guys in that 20 feet, that I was able to just have sidebar conversation with them real quickly. And most of it was off the record, and that'll stay between us. But, some of it was on and but I really wanted to thank them and really encourage them to go continue to tell those stories because they do matter. And they can, affect an outcome. And I really think it's part of our story and who we are and how we got here.
Absolutely. And it's the whole element of paying it forward. Yeah. What I love about that story is, they even told you, I think you left this part out. I'll refresh your memory. they told you, oh, coach, thanks for saying thanks. You're welcome. We'll keep doing that. And you're like, actually, no, go find the next Cabrini, go find the next Colfer. Yeah. It wasn't about you. In a moment when you just won a national championship, first ever in school history, something you've been working towards for over 2 decades, it was about, paying it forward for you, which I think speaks volumes about you as a human being, and especially, under those bright lights in that situation, and paying it forward because, it doesn't just give, that next Cabrini, the next Steve Colfer hope. It gives their administration hope. It gives their, their athletic director, whoever their direct report is, hope that, hey, maybe they are moving in the right direction and this person shouldn't be on the hot seat at a time when everyone at every level in every sport, small college, minor sport, seems to be on a hot seat. Anyone who's been anywhere for any period of time. So I think that speaks volumes, and it's something everyone can do. You can go pay it forward and thank people and help look out for and help promote the underdog when they're not in a position to promote themselves. I go back to the music industry a lot. I write about this in my book, Stadium Status, hashtag shameless self-promotion. But you see some major artists when they go out on stage, they're wearing the merch of the band that opened for them.
Yeah.
Think about that. They're wearing the T-shirt of the opening act as a sign of respect and to help promote the little guy that they appreciate.
And it's funny because when's the moment that happens in anyone's career? I don't know exactly, right? When do you get to that point where it no longer becomes just about you, it becomes about others? And it happens across every industry, right? And you have a much more you're able to have a different perspective, and so you're always at the climb, and I think win or lose the national championship or whatever, you come to a point in your career arc, right, where you realize like paying it forward and doing those types of things becomes really important, you know, and it becomes who you are and what you do. And again, it does mean sometimes promoting the competition, you know, and that's okay. You have to be confident enough in your product, your environment, your experience that you know that is not going to hurt you at the bottom line. It's probably going to help, you know, at the end of the day, because it's you being genuine and authentic to who you are. And I don't care in what industry you are, if those two elements are not present, you're not going to be ultimately successful. And I think in coaching and recruiting and all those things that I do, if you are absent of those two characteristics, success will be very fleeting or non-existent. And I don't know the moment in my career. I feel like I've always tried to be humble, and appreciative. But at the same time, I'm competitive as hell. Right. And I want to keep grinding and keep winning. And I sat in this office for many years and joked with recruits and the family that I just want to win one. Just let me, let me feel the experience. And if you come and Tommy comes and Billy comes, we're going to have a really good opportunity. Now this summer, I've had to amend that. And I say, man, I can tell you what it was like winning one. It's going to be even better when we win the next one. And you guys are there, right? And we're going to do this, and we're going to, and kids' faces light up, and dad's faces light up, and mom's faces light up, and I can share the experience and the feelings that not only I had, but the players who are in the team still, and the returning players, the alums, and so forth. And it's real, and people connect with real stories, and I think that to me is. What renews my energy, renews my grind, renews my competitiveness, in the fact that, yes, I'm trying to pay it forward, but at the same time, I'm confident and hungry in the product and the experience that we here have at Cabrini University from an educational standpoint, an athletic standpoint, and an environmental standpoint.
Absolutely. Steve, as we kind of wrap things up, I want to shamelessly promote what you have going on. I imagine somewhere out there listening or watching this is a parent or two of some outstanding scholar athletes, and they want to learn more about your program or just the institution in general. Maybe they have somebody who's a great soccer player living under their roof. Where can they learn more about you, connect with you personally, and also the institution?
Sure. I mean, obviously, landing on the Cabrini website or the CabriniAthletics.com website is a great place to start. I'm an email or phone call away. I've been here so long that I only have one email. I think every new hire has like three. They have their long version, the short version, and the numerical version. I have one. It's my first initial and my last name, so it's scolfer@cabrini.edu.
And so it happens you spend 98 years somewhere.
And because all these guys I've hired as assistants, I'll say, hey, what's your email? And they'll say, SC98, at Cabrini, and they have these cool little like things, and mine is just the same old
first initial, last name.
Exactly. But it's easy to remember, but our success and our culture and our program is replicated on this campus in every avenue, in some of the academic programs and some of the other extracurricular programs, and absolutely in almost every other athletic program that we have here. Success is contagious. It's real. It's tangible. The coaches in this program or in this athletic department were extremely happy, for us. but hungry for them as well, you know, and
Well, it gives them hope, just like you said. It gives them hope too, and
absolutely.
rising tide raises all ships.
Yeah. And I think our women's basketball coach texted me that maybe 2 minutes after the game. I couldn't be happier and excited, but she realized now how much work she wants to go do and continue to elevate her program, which is obviously a really good program already. But, you know, you know, I laughed, obviously, and just knowing her, that's her personality. But, you know, I do think it's contagious, you know, and you can learn from it. So there is so many great things going here. We have leadership that understands and gets and values the student experience, understands and values the student athlete experience, and doesn't have to, you don't have to trade one for the other. You don't have to swap out academics for athletics or vice versa. You can do both and be successful at both. And I say that we have close to somewhere between 80 and 85 All-Americans in our program's history. And none of them were a mess, you know, from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. on the academic side of campus, and then we're All-Americans from 3 to 5 on our side. You know, they had figured it out, and that bridge that they came across every day, you know, it went both ways, and they understood how to manage time, how to manage success, how to manage adversity, how to work within small and big groups. And again, that's being replicated all over our wonderful university here.
Awesome.
You know, great things are not only happening, but will continue to happen. And anyone who's out there that wants to learn more about Cabrini, connect with me. And if I'm not the right guy, I'll put you in touch, whoever can help and benefit your son or daughter or you personally, and have them learn about us and our environment and our story. Excellent.
Thanks so much, Steve. And I want to remind everybody that that web address is cabriniathletics.com. And that's a wrap on the show. Again, I think two things you can go do: seek out inexpensive experience, and then also, you know, root for your competition, so to speak. And thanks again, Steve. It was great having you on.
All right, John. Good seeing you, bud.